week, which this past Sunday, we talked about God's kids and their kids, which I've just shortened to God's kids' kids. But before we actually get into the sermon itself, something I thought would be fun. This is not trivia. It's not anything crazy. But I thought I would read you guys some quotes that I found that are just things that kids have said. So these are things parents have sent in, all right, and said, this is something my kid said, and kids say some really funny things. And so even if you're like, I don't like kids, all right, which might be some of you in this room, you can at least appreciate that they're sometimes hilarious, all right? So here we go. A mom sent this one in. My 5-year-old daughter asked, can I have a Twix? I said to her, you mean Twix? She said, no, I only want one. That's pretty good. All right, here's a good one from a soccer coach who coaches a team of preschoolers. He was trying to teach them how to kick the ball to score a goal. He says, when you're trying to score a goal, kick the ball with the laces of your shoes. A 4-year-old girl stops him and says, we're in preschool. There's only Velcro around here. They don't have laces on their shoes yet. Yeah, they're pretty smart. All right, here's one. A mom sat down with her 3-year-old daughter who was playing in her dollhouse and asked her which doll she could be. And the daughter replied, the one that does the dishes. It's pretty funny. All right. Let's see. Oh, here's a good one. All right. 4-year-old son, all right? My 4-year-old son was using his Spider-Man cup all day long without complaint. Then he hands it to me at the end of the day and calmly states, here, Mom, this is the worst cup I have ever seen. Which is just funny. Now, why? Let's see. Oh, this one's good. 2-year-old quote right here. So my daughter's age. 2-year-old hands a calculator to her dad and says, what's that? Can I hold it? He says, that's a calculator. She said, no, that's a CalcuNow. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. All right, 2 left, you guys. This one, I like these last 2 a lot. So the second to last one, here you go. I told my kids we are no longer saying shut up because it sounds mean and can hurt people's feelings. So my kids are getting creative with their use of words. My 9-year-old daughter was talking and talking, and my 6-year-old son couldn't take it anymore and said, silence, you peasant! It's pretty good. And then this one I just thought was really funny. So, let's see, is it a husband or... Okay, so a mom goes to see her mortgage advisor with her 7-year-old son. As they sit at the desk, the son sits down and says to the man, hello, I am not her husband. Just thought that was funny. All right, so, as you can see, kids are pretty funny, and if nothing else, we can appreciate them for that. But our text for tonight is going to challenge us to think about kids in a different way and to appreciate them for very different reasons. And so here's the thing. It's a super short text, so we're just going to read the whole thing right up front, and then we're going to talk about it. All right, so this is in Matthew 19. It's chapter 19, verses 13 through 15. So if you have a Bible and you want to turn there, or if you have it on the sheet in front of you, here we go. Or you can read it off the screen. It says, then children were brought to Jesus that he might lay his hands on them and pray. The disciples rebuked the people, but Jesus said, let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of heaven. And Jesus laid his hands on them and went away. Now we got to appreciate some things about this culturally before we figure out exactly what's going on here. In that day and age, it was very common for parents to bring their kids to people that they thought were wise rabbis, particularly in the Jewish culture. They would bring them to wise rabbis to have them blessed. And the way that the rabbi would do that is he would lay his hands on them and speak a blessing over them, something like what we would think of like praying for someone today, but it was a little different. And so they would put their hands on a child and they would bless them. Now, these children, it says children were brought to him. right? Well, someone had to bring them, right? These are kids. They're not going to just show up on their own. And so who brought them? Well, it was moms, dads, grandmas, aunts, uncles, whoever, right? Some adult, some older relative was bringing them to Jesus. And why were they doing that? Well, because at that point in time, when they knew Jesus was near, they knew that they had an opportunity to bring their kids to Jesus. That became their top priority, right? Mom and dad's priorities were bringing their kids to Jesus above everything else in that moment. Because moms and dads led pretty busy lives, especially dads, but even moms running at that time. They were more home, they were running the home, but they had a lot of things to take care of. And so this was not just a convenient undertaking. They had to make a decision, they had to prioritize this. And so that's exactly what they're doing. They're bringing their kids to Jesus and saying that matters most right now in this moment, because we have this opportunity to bring our kids to Jesus. We need to take advantage of it. That needs to be our top priority. And so the disciples saw spending time with these kids as something of a waste of time, as we're going to see in this verse, but a little later on in this verse. But before we even get to the disciples' incorrect reaction, you're going to see on your notes sheet, if you're following along, it says, number 1, parents. I want you to cross out the word parents. I want you to write the word me or myself. Either one of those would do the trick, all right? And here is your number 1 point. To be like these parents, make Jesus your number 1 priority. On Sunday, we use this point to encourage parents to make Jesus their kids' number 1 priority, but none of you guys have kids. And so we're going to say, make Jesus your number 1 priority. And if you're wondering, how can I do this? Maybe you're in a home where you go to church, but no one else in your family goes to church. How can I make Jesus my number 1 priority when my mom and dad are not doing this for me, when grandma and grandpa aren't doing this for me, whatever it is? Here's some ways you can put this into action, okay? How to make Jesus your top priority. We said that parents should lead the conversation on Jesus. They should look for opportunities to teach their kids about Jesus. Well, you, as the kid, should encourage the Jesus conversations to happen, particularly if mom and dad are not doing this. You should lead. You should say, I went to youth last night and we talked about this, and I just wanted to tell you what we learned about, and I would love to hear what you think about it. Right? But encourage that conversation, particularly if they are starting it. Encourage it, right? Don't discourage them when they're trying to talk to you about Jesus. Don't make them think that what they're saying is not important to you or that you don't want to hear what they have to say. You need to encourage that conversation. And the number 1 way you can encourage that conversation, particularly if your parents are starting the conversation with you, is participate in the conversation. Right? How many of you guys have ever done this? And you don't have to raise your hand. I know this is everyone in the room at some point. Mom and dad get you home and they say, "How was your day?" "Fine." "What'd you do?" "I don't know." "What? Okay, great." End of conversation, right? And we laugh, but that's true. That's a real conversation that probably happens more days than not in most of our households. Participate in this conversation. When they say, "What do you think about that?" or "What did you learn about last night?" or "What did you take out of the sermon this morning?" or whatever the question is, give them a little bit more than just, "I was good. I thought it was okay. Yeah, it was okay. We talked about Jesus." Duh. All right? Give them a little bit more than that. Actually participate. And the easiest way to participate in the conversation? You actually have to prepare for the conversation. That's what we're doing right now, right? Because if mom and dad ask you, "What did you guys learn about?" If you're paying attention, if you're taking notes, if you're following along, you're going to be able to answer that question. You're going to be able to contribute to that conversation. And so prepare for that conversation. If it's after a Sunday morning, pay attention to whoever's talking on stage and see what they're talking about and how you can apply it to your life so that when someone asks you, "What did you talk about?" or "What did you learn this morning?" you have an answer and you can discuss. And so let me just encourage you guys, especially if you have parents, maybe you're in the situation where your parents were in the sermon on Sunday, and this week they've been really weird. They've been like, look, we need to read the Bible together, we need to pray together, and you're like, this is not normal, right? I know that there's some of y'all in here, right? You're nodding your heads, I see it, okay? Yeah, my man in the back just raised his hand. He's like, yeah, that's me. All right, okay, all right. This is great. Let me tell you, they're doing what they're supposed to do, all right? They are following through with exactly what Pastor Hayden told them to do, and they're doing it immediately, which is awesome. Okay, now you might be like, this is so awkward. We do not normally do this. What do I do now? Right? This is so weird. My family does not do this. I don't know what to do. My encouragement is go with it. All right? Even if it's a little awkward at first, even if you're like, this doesn't fit into my normal routine, whatever it is, just go with it. Because your parents are doing something very important. They are following biblical principle about the fact that parents should lead their kids in instruction in the Lord. So Bible time, family prayer time, devotional time, whatever you want to call it, it has to be the most important thing your family's doing. Right? And so how can you play a part in that? Well, number one, when mom and dad say, no, we're not going to do whatever that thing that you want to do is until we've done this, don't have a poor attitude about it, right? Don't think of it as a chore. Don't think of it as it's keeping you from doing something quote unquote more fun or that you would rather be doing. No, engage in what they're doing with you. Spend that time together in the Bible, in prayer, whatever it is, discussing things that you've learned. And let me just encourage you guys, as you get older, especially some of you guys are already at this age, but like, if you're at the age where you're thinking about either, maybe you're good enough at whatever your like extracurricular is that you can start doing it like Saturdays, Sundays, like all weekend long, or maybe you're at the age where you're like, I want to get a job and start making some money for myself. I'm not going to discourage you from getting a job, but I am going to discourage you from saying, put me on the schedule anywhere. I'll work anytime. Block off those Sunday mornings, block off those Wednesday nights. And I'll just tell you this, if you have a boss who's like, I'm not going to do what you're saying, you're new here, or what gives you the right to try to think you're going to tell me when I can and can't schedule you, then that's not the job for you. God has a better job for you somewhere else with someone who's going to be respectful of the fact that you're trying to communicate that Jesus is your number one priority. And so as you spend time with your family in the Bible and in prayer, right, you are communicating to your parents that Jesus is your number one priority too, right? It's important. Because here's the thing, if you're not willing to embrace the awkwardness for a little while and just work through it, if you just make a big deal out of it every time and it becomes just really difficult, they're going to get discouraged. And if they get discouraged, the worst thing they could do is give up. And so I don't want anyone in this room to lead their parents to give up trying to spend that important time with you in the Bible. All right, so that's parents, that's your role and how you can help your parents to make Jesus your number one priority. Now, moving on to the disciples here in this text, all right? Who should have been the last people discouraging moms and dads from bringing their kids to Jesus? You would say the disciples should have been the last people to do that, especially considering how much we've been talking about kids and how God values kids and certain characteristics in kids that we should emulate. Then yet the disciples, when people are bringing their kids to Jesus, the disciples say, stop. You're getting in our way. You're slowing us down. This is a waste of our time. And so then in verse 14, you see Jesus say, and you can't really appreciate in Matthew his reaction, quite how strong his reaction is. In Mark 10:14, it actually says Jesus was indignant. It means he was like unhinged. He was angry. He could not believe what the disciples were doing. And in verse 14, he says, let the little children come to me and do not hinder them. He's telling them, guys, you are doing the opposite of what you should be doing. These people are saying, bringing my kid to Jesus is number one priority right now, and you're trying to stop them. What a foolish thing to try to prevent. And so he says, let them come to me. And then he says, for to such belongs the kingdom of heaven. So let's split that in two. All right, there's something there that we can take away as a church, and it also can be a personal attitude that we can adopt. And so point number 2 is seize every opportunity to teach our kids or to teach kids. You guys don't have kids, but think about the church having, how many kids do we have? Anybody know? Anybody want to throw? Too many. Never too many. How many of you guys want to throw out a number? How many kids do you guys think we have on a typical Sunday morning?
200.
What was it? 250? Not quite 250. It's about 100. It hovers around 150 to like 170, depending on the week. So it's a pretty significant number of kids, okay?
Oh, so you mean 267?
No, I don't. No, I don't mean that number at all. You know, there was a week where it was that number, and then we intentionally were like, Lord, please send one more kid. And then they came. So that just tells you something right there. It was 168. So anyway, so we have about 150, 170 kids on any given Sunday. So there is a lot of kids. I don't know how many they get in Adventure Club. I know we had a week where it was like 150, and I think on a night like tonight, there's probably 120, 130, something like that. Anyway, our kids ministry here is huge. And part of our church's philosophy, I don't know if any of you guys have ever been at other churches that do this differently. Some churches just say, you know what? Bring the whole family. The kids can just hang out in service and the whole family's together. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But as a church, we have decided we need to teach kids and meet kids where they're at, teach them on a level they can understand. Because I don't know about you guys, but me having my 2-year-old sitting through a Sunday morning sermon, she's not going to get anything out of that. My 7-year-old son might get a couple things out of that, but by and large, a lot of it's going to go right over his head. My 9-year-old daughter, she would probably get a decent amount of things out of it. But you know what they get more out of? Spending time with teachers who have content specifically prepared to teach their age where they're at in a way that they can understand, that's fun, that's engaging, and it's kid-friendly. But as a church, particularly your age, tends to find kids annoying. Am I right? I mean, we all do at times, right? Kids are kind of annoying. And you know what's funny is, in every instance of those quotes that I read to you guys, that was kids being funny when they're not trying to be funny. I do not ever hardly find kids funny when they're actually trying to be funny. I don't know why. They're just not good at it, okay? But what I want you to know is how we think about the kids at our church matters, right? How we think about you guys, your age matters, but it also matters how we think about the guys behind you. As a church, we have to be welcoming to kids. We shouldn't be wishing there were less kids on a Sunday, or man, there's just so many kids here. I can't even stand in the lobby without kids running by and whatever, right? And I'm not saying that we don't ever have moments where we're like, this is chaos, it's crazy. It would be easier if we didn't have as many kids. But the truth of the matter is, they're here and we want to reach them where they're at. Because think about it this way, okay? We're about to be in the Christmas season. How many of you guys as children, young children, were led to believe that there was a big fat guy who lived in the North Pole, and he had elves making toys, and he would once a night go around the world and leave presents under your tree and every other kid's tree? Come on, anybody? Come on. Okay, can we agree that kids are pretty impressionable? Like, you can get them to believe pretty much, and if you're just finding out that Santa's not real, let me apologize. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ruin that for you. I know. So here's the thing. Think about, though, how accepting of something so preposterous kids are, right? They are very impressionable. They can be led to believe almost anything. What more important thing is there for them to be led to believe than the truth about Jesus Christ, right? So they're at an age where you can get them to believe that. You can get them to buy into that. You can begin teaching them really important truths. Even if they don't understand all of the nuances of what that means, they can at least know and understand the stories and the things that we learn in the Bible at a level that is true for them as well. And so that's why our kids' ministry philosophy is we're not just babysitting these kids. We're not just doing childcare, right? We're saying it's important to reach kids. We're going to put our money where our mouth is, right? And not only are we putting our money, like literally, we're putting our finances there, right? We're creating a whole new kids wing that's going to hold more kids than we can right now. But not only do we put our money financially where our mouth is, we also want to be a church that puts our best people in position to teach kids. And guess what? Some of those people might be right here in this room. Excuse me. You know how I know that? Because when I was y'all's age, I helped out with our kids ministry at my church for a long time, all the way through middle school, high school, college. I served, I should say, in our kids ministry area for all of that time. And I can't tell you how many times, like, the teacher in the room was talking or trying to teach kids something or whatever, and you know who they wanted to hang out with and you know who they wanted to actually learn from? The young people in the room. Why? Because you're still young enough that you're cool, right? You're not mom and dad to them. You're cool, you're approachable, you can be their friend, right? And so let me just encourage you, if it's possible for you to serve on a Sunday, if it's possible when we do summer camps, if it's possible when we do anything that we have kids at, don't be the last people to want to serve in that area. I think it would be great to have more of you guys involved in that because you are at a perfect age to do it. You're old enough to know like better than to let them just run rampant and be wild, but you're also young enough that they're going to try to tackle you and climb on you and you're going to have fun with them. But then you can also have opportunities to teach them really serious things too, right? And so if you're interested in that, talk to me, talk to Kat. We would love to find a spot to plug you in, okay? Now, why am I telling you about our kids' ministry philosophy? Because as a church, that's what we honestly believe is that we should be giving them the absolute best of what our church has to offer. Right? And think about this, maybe you can understand this even though you're not parents. Think about this from like as your parents think about your education. Some of you guys probably go to a school where your parents want you to go, not because you love it there, but because they're like, this is where you're going to get the best education, right? I see some head nods, you all understand. We should have that same approach when it comes to church for our children, right? For the kids of our church. If we want to give our kids the best education, the best opportunity to learn, the best coach for their football team, or whatever it is, to get them the furthest ahead in life, we have to take that same approach with church. We shouldn't just be sticking them in a room and getting a warm body to go watch them, right? We should be saying, we have an opportunity to teach these kids, to win these kids for the kingdom from a very early age. Why would we squander that and waste time when Jesus told us we didn't need to waste time? He says in verse 14, for to such belongs the kingdom of heaven. Now, is he saying that kids, literal kids, are the ones that are in the kingdom? No, right? He's appealing and using them as an illustration. And what he's doing is using them as an illustration to say that every person should have a childlike faith. And that's important. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But the third point is exactly that. Grasp the childlike nature of saving faith. What do we mean by childlike? There's a contrast here, right? Because you could have childlike faith or you could be childish. Which one is Jesus talking about? He's not talking about being childish. He's not saying we should value immaturity. We should value self-centeredness. We should value, what are some of the other ways I described kids in my questions from last night? We shouldn't value things like ungratefulness, stubbornness, unwillingness to listen. That's not what he's talking about. No, he's talking about childlike qualities, recognizing our full dependence on him, having childlike joy when we experience God's goodness, being enthusiastic about spending time together in God's Word as a community. I'll share this with you guys. This was just God's timing perfectly. This morning, as I was getting out of bed, my son came and tackled me in my bed, and he said, "Dad, I'm excited about today." And I was like, "Okay, it's Wednesday. Like, what are you excited about?" Thinking maybe I had forgotten about something or a moment of panic. I said, what are you excited about? He said, well, he does this every Wednesday. I have gymnastics today. I was like, oh, that is exciting. He goes, oh, and Adventure Club. I mean, he was so excited to come. Guess what? He comes every week, okay? But you would have thought it was like Christmas morning that he was so excited to go to Adventure Club tonight. How often do we not have that attitude when it's going to church or opening our Bibles or praying? You guys think about this. We have the opportunity at every moment of every day to be in conversation with the God of the universe. That's pretty exciting stuff. And yet we're like, I gotta pray again? Didn't I just do this yesterday? Or maybe for someone it's like, didn't I just do this last week? Okay, but we should be so excited to talk to the God of the universe. He wrote us an entire book, a long one at that. It's essentially a love letter from him to you, right? And I don't mean that in like some weird romantic way. I mean, this book tells us about God's love for us. Why would we not be excited to open that? Why would we not want to know everything there is to know about this God who loves us? How often do we say, well, it's Wednesday night, I could go to life group, I could go to students on Wednesday night, or you know what, I could just stay home and maybe there's, I don't know, a basketball game or some TV show's on or some movie that I'm in the middle of, or I could just stay on my phone or play video games or whatever it is. How often are we like, man, I gotta like stop doing this to go to students? We should totally have the opposite attitude, right? I get to go and spend time in a community of believers with other people who are pursuing God and want me to do that well as well. Why would I not want to be around those people? Why would I not be excited to go and do that? That's what it means to have a childlike faith. Recognize you're entirely dependent on God for everything that he gives you, and be excited to have God as your Father. Just as a kid trusts those who are their caregivers, we should trust God in the same way. And so kids, what Jesus is saying here, they are models of dependence and trust and also meekness and humility. Right? How often do we do kids, if I as a father, if I tell my son, no son, you're not going to do that. He doesn't say, oh, but Dad, I deserve to do this. Why will you not let me do it? If I say, no, you're not going to do that, he just says, okay. Right? How often do we not do that with God? When God tells us we shouldn't do something or we should do something, we're like, but why though? And I will tell you this, okay, my 2-year-old, who acts more like a 3-year-old right now, that's her favorite question in the world. Why? Why? And that's what we do with God so often, right? We're like, God, why do I have to do it this way? Why do I have to do what you're saying? Why can't I do what I want? And we whine, and I don't mean literally whine, but that's our attitude, is we look at God and we're like, you're just trying to keep me from having fun. And the truth of the matter is, God is he's a good Father. He wants what's best for us. And so if he says we shouldn't do something, he's protecting us from something. If he says we should do something, he's trying to grow us. He's trying to do and get us to do what's best for us. And so we should look to him like that, as a good Father, with that same childlike wonder and excitement to be his child. And so last thing here is we just have to remember, right, that just when I say we're entirely dependent on God, I don't just mean there's certain things that we are all equally dependent on that God provides in his goodness that's available to everyone, right? The air that we breathe, the earth that we live on. For most of us, the food that we eat and the water we drink and the house we live in and all these things, right? God provides that, yes. But our dependence on him doesn't end with meeting our physical needs, right? Our dependence on God is based on the fact that we have no chance of salvation apart from what he has done for us. We cannot save ourselves. We have no ability to save ourselves. And yet, even though we were the ones who created the brokenness in the world, even though we were the ones that rejected God and what he had for us when he created humans, when he created man, even though we were the ones who messed it up, God did everything that had to be done that only he could do to make it possible for us to be in relationship with him again. When he sent his son, Jesus, right? There's a verse in the Bible that says he is both just, meaning like he is a God of justice, and the justifier, meaning he is the one who did it. He accomplished the justice that was required. How did he do that? By sending Jesus, his son, to live a perfect life, to take on sin and die on the cross, even though he didn't deserve it, even though he was perfect. He had no sin. He was so undeserving of death, yet he took on the most painful, shameful, embarrassing, sufferable death known to mankind. And at that place, he took on our sin and took the penalty for our sin. And he defeated death itself by rising to new life again. And in that way, he defeated the power of sin. And so for us, if we believe in what Jesus did for us, if we turn away from our sin and we place our faith in what he did for us, that's all that we have to do. God's already done the work. We just have to believe in the work that's already been accomplished. And so that's why we have to look at God in total dependence, because we couldn't do any of that on our own. The only way that it works is because God sent Jesus as a substitute for us. He took our place. He took what we deserved. And if we were left to our own, that's what we would have deserved, and that's what we would have been destined to. And because Jesus did that for us, we no longer have to suffer those consequences. And so with that, let's pray, and then you can go and spend time discussing in your groups. God, we admit that at times we do not come to you like a grateful child, but rather we act rather childish in our faith. I pray, God, that as we have studied this text and as we explore the questions on the applications as a group, God, I just pray that you help us to always recognize our total dependence on you, recognize that apart from you we could do nothing, that we would have no hope in this world apart from what you've already done for us in sending Jesus. God, I pray that you would help us to truly make choices that align with you being our top priority. I pray that you would help us to have a fresh attitude and a positive outlook on why we should care about the many, many kids that you have blessed our church with. And I just pray, God, that as we look to study this together the rest of this night, that we would also look to apply it in our lives beyond just Wednesdays and Sundays, that we would look to apply this to all of our life, that we would make you our number one priority in everything that we do, and that we would faithfully follow after you as one of your children. God, we love you and we thank you for sending Jesus for us, and in his name we pray. Amen.